So Ephesians talks a lot about the church, and we're all leading churches, or trying to anyway. So I thought I'd kick off our conversation just by thinking about this image of the body that Paul uses. And I love in chapter 4 how he says that Christ is the head, and then the whole body being fitted and held together by what every joint supplies. I'm just curious, how you guys have seen that played out in your congregations. How do we see the church kind of doing the work and holding itself together versus everything having to come from staff or coming from pastors or whatnot?
When you think about the body and talk about all the different elements, right? If you think of church trying to be staff-led, you can never get all of those skills and gifts and capabilities at staff. You need to have everyone involved.
Right.
And so I just think of the very many times that we really, people in the body who bring a certain skill to things just bring so much value to that. And so you just can't staff for that, and that's not the way to do it.
What have you found in your congregations helpful for people that are trying to make that transition from just being there, attending, to participating, being really holding the body together themselves? Have there been things you've found that have worked for people or helped people do that?
We've sort of learned in our church that just announcing these needs doesn't seem to go anywhere.
Right,
it's almost like, and you said this earlier, it's almost people gotten really good at being like, yeah, whatever, And so it's really a personal connection, like oftentimes going to someone and saying, I've seen this in you, and I think you can really help here. And I know that builds ownership, right? Because before it's always like, well, this is their church.
Yeah.
When does it become my church? When does it become, our church? So it's helping people understand that there's a broader set.
Yeah.
And personally interacting
The
with people
relational component.
I think the relational is key.
That's great.
Yeah, I was definitely kind of one of those people where it's like very introverted, but then kind of realizing like, I do need that community, I need those people. And it's like something too that I realized that like we kind of, at church, like you always kind of talk like, like the pew sitters, like the people who just kind of like come in and they just like sit there and like that's all they do. But I feel like, throughout COVID and like just getting all these like newer people like involved, it's kind of made me realize like, we all want to be a part of something, right?
Yeah.
We want to be used, we want to feel connected, right? COVID actually has really allowed us to make those connections and make those growths in like places that we never really thought before, which I think is like really cool, right? Like I think we spent a lot of time kind of like lamenting what was lost, but in reality, like we've really gained like a lot and gained so much.
It's funny because it seems like it almost like force people to the extremes. Like either you're sitting at home and you're just watching church and you're doing nothing.
Yeah.
Or you're like even more involved and you're helping everything to function. But I feel like that's always the challenge is like the temptation is just to consume church as a product. You just show up and I get fed and I go home and that's it. It's just a meal, but versus like participating in it.
The thing that I've been holding on to is asking God to show me what this person's gift is for my community, not the role I want to pigeonhole this person into. Because we end up with people doing just some amazing things that I can't even fathom or imagine.
One of the things I've been learning is, because you always get that scenario where somebody comes and says, I'm really frustrated by this or something's not working. They look at you like, what are you going to do about it? And I'm always like, I'm starting to learn like, turn that around and be like, well, that seems like maybe something that God's saying to you that's bugging you. Maybe there's something you're gifted in. What could you help with in that? And I think that's not always an easy conversation, but I think I'm learning it's a better conversation because oftentimes that could really be that person is gifted in that and it bothers them because it's a thing that they really want to see change. The answer isn't to go to you and be like, Paul, you need to change that. It's like, well, I can do some stuff, but I think you might be able to do something here. And so I think we're trying to get better at doing that.
Yeah, I love what a couple of you guys have mentioned about how like you see something in someone else and you're able to call that out. And I think we do that as pastors and leaders, but people do that with each other too. Small group leaders and mentors, and they say, hey, I see this in you. And I think that's really, I've had people say that to me when I was coming up in ministry, and like that's a really powerful thing when somebody sees something in you and calls it out. And that